Okay, so we had some challenges in class today, trying to figure out how to do our cladograms. There was some questions about exactly how to do this and how to make it all work and fit. And so I just wanted to clarify some information just to hopefully help all of you guys understand exactly what we did. So please watch this video because when you come into class on Thursday, I'm going to expect that you are where I want you to be. Okay. So first thing I want you to do is I want you to get out the packet that we were working on today, the Building a Phylogenetic Tree packet. And I want you to turn to the page with the beetles on it because this is the one that I'm going to talk about. So they have already filled in the chart for us, and they've already filled out the matrix for us, and they've already filled in a potential phylogenetic tree. And so I want to work through this example so that you guys can go back and work with either the butterfly, the bird, or the flowers to create your phylogenetic tree that I want you to bring in on Thursday. So what we need to remember, or we need to know that perhaps we didn't talk about today in class, is that whenever you have a branch on the phylogenetic tree, it's like an organism. You have an ancestral organism, and then there's a divergence. And animals or organisms, plants, whatever we're talking about, let's talk about beetles in this case, they go one way or the other at this branch. And I think the thing that I want to emphasize that I didn't have a chance to emphasize today in class is that it is only after they branch that changes start to occur, or a change in trait, or what we have come to know as evolution, will take place. So let's look at this cladogram as our example. So at the top we have groups, we have A and B, C and F, and D and E. Now A and B and C and F, according to this, each have only one thing that is different about them. So what we want to do is we want to go back to the chart and find A and B and look at all of the traits and see what is different about them. And if we do that, we see that head color is different. So what we can do on our phylogenetic tree is we can say that after they shared a common ancestor, they branched apart from one another. And organism A, or beetle A, ended up developing a white head. So we would write white head because after they branched, this organism evolved to have a white head. And after they branched, organism B evolved to have a black head. And that's the only feature that is different about these organisms. I'm going to move the table a little closer. Hopefully you guys can see what I'm writing. Okay. Then what we want to do is we want to do the same thing with organisms C and F. And so organisms C and F, if we compare everything that those two organisms had, the difference with them is color of spots. And so organism C has black spots, and organism F, in this case a beetle, has white spots. So C has black spots, so I'm going to write that, black spots. And F has white spots. Now, what is something that A, B, C, and F all have in common with one another that organism D and E does not have in common? So in other words, let's work our way now down to this very far ancestral organism. So what is the one thing that A, B, C, and F have that organisms D and E do not have, or something that's similar about these two that is also similar about these four? So take a look at the chart and see if you can find out what it is that is similar. And hopefully, if you do that, you will see that these four all have no antenna, or antennae, I guess. And D and E do have antennae. been the first trait that differed between these two. So we've got something that separates the group of 4 and the group of 2. We've got something that separates A from B. We've got something that separates C from F. So what we're looking for now is something that is in common with A and B that is different than something that is common between C and F. So a common trait that is found in both A and B, and a common trait that is found in both C and F. So take a look at the chart and see if you can come up with what that is. And if you look at the chart, you might find that either you come up with the idea of A and B are both yellow, whereas C and F are both orange. So we can put that up here, yellow and orange. Okay. Or you might have recognized that A and B are both oval shaped, whereas C and F are both round. So now we actually have 2 traits. So what does that mean? That means that after they shared a common ancestor, A and B developed 2 differences, 2 traits that were different from C and F, which would be developed 2 other traits, in this case, orange and round. It is possible that after they diverge, they have 2 different traits, not just 1 trait that's going to change after they take that fork in the road. Okay. In terms of organisms D and E, they actually have 2 differences. There are 2 things that are different between them. And if you look at D and E on the chart here, you'll find that the 2 things that are different between D and E are that they are oval and round, and that D is white. What is that? White head color, whereas E has black head color. Okay. So the 2 traits that D and E differ on probably evolved after those 2 organisms split from their common ancestor. Now, what we don't have yet on our table here is pink, meaning we don't have the pink body color that D and E share in common. So that must have evolved after they branched from a common ancestor, since they both have this trait. We'll put it here. Okay, none of these 4 have that trait, the pink trait. And what else are we missing? We're missing the visible jaws. We haven't put that on the trait. And if we look at visible jaws, okay, we can see that D and E have that in common. So again, it's something that probably evolved when D and E split from the rest of the group, but before they split from one another. So we're going to put no visible jaws here as a trait that evolved after they, and visible jaws over here. So we have visible jaws, no antenna, antenna, pink, and no visible jaws as the traits that have evolved the earliest. Remember, this would be back in time here, so this would be the past in terms of time, and this would be the present. Now, one other thing that I want to point out to you guys is that you will see that oval body shape and round body shape developed over here and over here, independent of one another. So this can happen. This is actually called convergent evolution, and we will talk about this a little bit. But they did evolve, as did the white head and the black head. We see here that organism A, beetle A, actually evolved a white head long after the split from the common ancestor with D, but that D went ahead and also independently evolved a white head. It must have conferred some evolutionary advantage. And so this is very possible. Okay, so the main points to take away are that the change or the change in trait, whatever trait we're talking about, happens after the split. So it happens sort of along the path between one split and the next split. Okay, that's one thing we want to keep in mind. And the other thing we want to keep in mind is that it is possible to have traits that independently evolve. The same trait, such as the white head that evolved over here with beetle D and beetle A, even though they're very far apart from each other on the phylogenetic tree. Okay, so what I hope for you to do now is to go back, and you can, of course, watch this video as many times as you want to. That's the first thing. Second thing is that you can go ahead and reread this yourself. So reread this page with the beetles and then flip to page 4, which explains how they made their decisions about organizing the phylogenetic tree. And then the most important thing to do is to, after you've watched this video and after you've done all of the thinking about the beetles and the example, is to go back to your butterfly or your bird or your flower and go ahead and try to draw your phylogenetic tree again. Try to think of it as the splits and what do they all have in common, or what is the one thing, for instance, that separates the major groupings from one another. Like I saw that antenna was something that separated this group over here from this group, and that was why I picked antenna early on in my tree. Okay, so hopefully this was helpful, and obviously you can always email me or come to class with questions on Thursday, but I will be very glad that you watch this. And if I were to ask you for the magic password, which occurs only at the very end of the video, the magic password is supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.